Hi, I'm Jim.
And I'm Kate, and welcome to episode 9 of the Creative Content Studio podcast. Hello, Jim.
Hello there.
So, our plan for episode 9 was going to be, for you keen-eared listeners on last week's episode 8, a Q&A based on some of the questions that some people very kindly put forward on Instagram. But we've had to have a bit of a replan, reschedule, reevaluate because of a relatively eventful past 24 hours. Would you like to fill our listeners / viewers in on what has occurred?
You can tell Kate is not happy with what's gone on in the last 24 hours.
There is sympathy. Don't worry. There is a level of sympathy, but no, genuinely, it's not very nice.
Yes, so less than 24 hours ago, I ruptured an Achilles playing football, which is not ideal.
And very, very painful.
Maybe I need to not play football. And so the bottom half of my leg, my left leg, is in a cast at the moment.
I can't see that on here, but yeah.
You can't see it on any of the cameras, but I'm hobbling around on crutches, can't put any weight on it at all. And I'm waiting for to find out what to do next. It might be an operation, it might not be, we don't know.
Yeah.
But it's not ideal. Kate's not very happy, and I can understand why.
It's not that I'm not happy. It's just poses difficulties for our day-to-day life. That's all.
Many a challenge.
But we will overcome, as we always do.
Worse things happen at sea.
Yeah.
As I said to
comforting.
An older gentleman yesterday outside the hospital. Yeah, he was chatting to me about it.
Right.
He was asking me what had happened.
Mm-hmm.
And I said to him, to conclude the conversation, worse things happen at sea.
It's true.
So there you go.
And on that note,
what are we talking about
today? Move on to what was going to be episode 10, which is all about hosting. So the back end, as you were of podcasts. Let's take that out. The back end of podcasting. So hosting and distribution once recorded on all the wherever you find podcasts platforms.
Wherever you get your podcasts.
Yeah. So kind of first question really is, what is a hosting site or a podcast host?
Let's start with the kind of idea of like, how does your podcast get to these different places?
Is it magic?
Because it is magic. Because that explains how hosting sites work and why we need them and what they do. So your podcast needs to live somewhere. And if you're used to kind of social media and YouTube and these other platforms, typically what happens is you simply upload to that platform and your file lives with them in their magic servers somewhere in the mysterious cloud
of wonders.
A cloud of wonders that they've invented, which is ultimately in a big server somewhere. And so we're used to that concept. That the different platforms are where the content lives. However, podcasts are different. And the reason that podcasts are different is because the hosting site is a separate entity altogether where your podcast actually lives to the platforms where it is actually delivered. So when I say delivered, I mean like Apple Podcasts and Spotify and what used to be Stitcher and Google Podcast, no longer with us, Overcast, some of these other ones, Deezer. There's loads of places you can get podcasts, lots of podcast players. So there's loads of places that you can get podcasts, lots of different players. If you just go onto the App Store, whether it's Google Play or the iOS App Store, and search for a podcast player, you'll find there's loads of them. The big ones that we all know about, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, they don't actually hold your podcast. That's the difference between podcasts and other forms of social media. We're uploading to YouTube, we're uploading to Instagram, we're uploading to TikTok, all these different things. But when it comes to a podcast, we don't upload to Apple Podcasts, as an example. We upload to our hosting site, and our hosting site then distributes the podcast via the means of what's called an RSS feed. So this is ultimately, to keep it really simple, it's a web link. So it's an address that links back to where your podcast hosting site is holding your show. That's kind of ultimately where it lives, is in the podcast hosting site.
So what are the different types of hosting sites, and how do you set up an account with them? How do you get started with them?
Yeah, so really good question. So there are tons of them out there. So to go through them all would be bonkers. but I'll name a couple and talk about some of the differences. But rest assured, there's a lot out there, and you should do a little bit of research into each one. But hopefully, the stuff that I'm going to tell you about now will help with your searching and your considerations, and when you're picking which one you want. So there are loads of them. They some of them are paid services, some of them aren't. Some of them have tiered. A lot of them have tiered services in terms of their payment plans, based on how much of a service they're offering you or not. To give you an example, so there's one called Podbean, which is quite a famous one. And essentially what you do to create an account, like you would with any other service online, you head on to Podbean and you pick the service level that you'd like, the payment plan that you'd like. Usually there's a free version, and the free version, often the difference with these podcast hosting sites, the free version often only offers you a limited amount of upload space, if you like. So it might say that you're only allowed to have 2 hours worth of episodes on their hosting site. So that's not going to work for many people's shows on a longer term basis. If you're literally just trying to release like one show or something, then that might work. And when I say, I use Podbean as an example there, like I said, do your research when it comes to checking out what the specifics of their plan are. But last time I looked, they had a free tier with a limited amount of storage capacity. That's usually the sort of step one. Then step 2, so the sort of first paid tier might be, okay, so you were getting 2 hours for free of stored content. Now you're allowed 5 hours, and you pay $12 a month, that sort of thing. They're usually in dollars. And then you've got like another tier that may say, with this tier you get unlimited, but you can also have 2 users. So you can have, say it's like you and a colleague who work on the podcast together, they can have a separate login to you, that kind of thing. So that's one of the things, or a couple of the things that differentiate different hosting sites. And so what you'll find is, if you went on to, there's another one called Captivate, for example, they'll offer their own specialities in terms of more bandwidth, in terms of more users. And it's usually kind of bandwidth or storage space, I was to say, rather than bandwidth. Storage space and a number of users are normally the ones. Sometimes you'll see, and I think Podbean offers this one, like an integration with something like YouTube. And when I say an integration, so what they'll typically do is you post your podcast to Podbean, and as well as distributing it to all the podcast hosting sites, it distributes it to YouTube, or it uploads it to your YouTube account for you. Now, typically, a lot of those don't deal with an actual video file. So what are they uploading to YouTube? Often what they're doing is uploading your audio to YouTube with like a stock image or a waveform image over the top, which personally I think, yes, maybe it's a bit more convenient, and if you've got no other plan for video, maybe it's better than nothing. But I don't think it's a particularly great strategy to have your podcast on YouTube as a waveform still image type of thing. I think it's not going to do well. Basically, YouTube's not going to reward you for that kind of content. So a lot of them offer that sort of thing, or some of them offer that sort of thing. A lot of them offer different tiers of storage, different numbers of users, that kind of thing. And you ultimately you have to pick which ones are going to best suit you. And setting up an account is just as simple as with any other internet service. You log on, you give them an email address, and away you go. Obviously a bank card if it's the paid services. And then usually, in terms of like what you do next, it's a case of giving them the information that is then going to be distributed out to the podcast platforms. So the information being the podcast title, the show bio, the podcast cover. So we've talked about that in a previous episode, the sort of 3,000 pixel by 3,000 pixel image that's going to be used as the thumbnail on all the players. You upload all of that stuff, and then you'll usually upload a trailer or your first episode or whatever. And what a lot of these sites offer, these hosting sites offer, is that they will kind of get the approvals with all of the different podcast platforms. And when I say approvals, what do I mean with that? So most of them, it's just as simple as we're going to distribute your podcast to this platform. That's the end of the approval process. With some of them, there is another step. So Apple Podcast being the biggest podcast platform where you'll need another step. And that other step is that you'll need to log into a website called podcastsconnect.apple.com. So podcastsconnect.apple.com. I'll link that in the show notes. And that website you log into with your Apple ID, and you give them the address, the web address of your RSS feed. So your podcast hosting site has created your RSS feed, which is then going to be distributed to all the platforms. You're then giving your RSS feed that has been created by your hosting site to Apple via podcastsconnect.apple.com. And then they are establishing that it's legitimate and everything's okay. And you then can hit a publish button on Apple Podcasts, and then your show is live with them. If you don't do that step, it'll be live with everybody else. It just won't be live with Apple. So you have to do that little step in between, kind of a crucial one for Apple.
Mm-hmm.
For Spotify, don't typically have to do anything at all. They'll just take the RSS feed that's been given to them by the podcast hosting site. Some of the ones that are now, I won't go on about them because they're no longer with us, but like Google Podcasts and Stitcher and stuff, there was a little process for them too, but a lot of them don't exist anymore. So it's really pretty straightforward. Your hosting site is going to do the bulk of the work for you. It's just that little Apple Podcast bit, and they'll all have like a little guide on there. So if it will say connect your show to Apple usually, and then it will tell you exactly what to do. So if you don't remember what I said there about podcastsconnect.apple.com, don't worry, it will be in the hosting site. Absolutely fine.
Okay. As far as the sort of hosting site go, is there one that you'd recommend? I have a three-pronged question. Are there any free ones? I know you said that some are paid for, some aren't, and obviously sometimes you have tiers of payment. Are free ones just as good as ones that you have to pay for? And third, does it kind of depend on your format? You mentioned about bandwidth and things like that. So do you have to research based on, I suppose, length of episodes and how much you've maybe batch recorded and all that sort of thing? Or is that might be just revisiting the first?
No, I think that's definitely a consideration, is your format and so on might lend itself to a free tier that's offered. So as an example, say a podcast hosting site is offering you 10 hours of free space, if you like, so 10 hours of recording on their site, used as storage and distributed. Now that 10 hours, if you're only going to make a limited series and it's going to be 6 hours long and you're not going to do it anymore, that might be great. That might be exactly what you need, and therefore you don't need to pay any more than that. You don't need to pay for more storage. If your show is going to be every single week and you're going to run it for the next 5 years, or at least you don't have a plan of how long it's going to run, it's just going to keep running, then you're going to need to think quite quickly about your storage capacity. So if a podcast hosting site is offering you 2 hours a month, that's probably not going to cut it for you. So you might need to consider. So definitely look at the format that you're doing. Does it match up with what the site is asking you for? Don't just go for free because it's free. And similarly, you don't necessarily just need to pay because it's, because you think, well, if I pay more, it'll be better. Not necessarily. Like, take a look at what is being offered to you. I've heard really good things about Captivate as an example. I think they're a UK-based company, so shout out to them in terms of things that they can do to help you with discoverability. There's Acast, which is obviously a very big name within the podcasting world. Acast help podcasters monetize their show, even if they're really small. So their sort of notion is, if you're too small to get a sponsor, we can insert ads into your podcast for you and give you a cut of that money. That's kind of the idea. Last I checked, you needed to have some kind of US bank account to receive that money though. So again, you might need to think about that. They might have also changed that since, so do check that out. But that was Acast's kind of model, was we're going to help you monetize even if you're not big enough to be monetized, if that makes sense. Then you've got the one that I typically use and unfortunately isn't a small company, but is what's called, the website is called creators.spotify.com. This is owned by Spotify. It used to be Anchor. So if you know anything about podcasting, like to the audience, if they know anything about podcasting and they've researched this stuff, they may have come across the name Anchor at a certain point. Spotify bought Anchor so that they could offer a hosting site to people. And ultimately, the reason that they've done that is so that they can get more people into the world of podcasting, potentially more exclusive podcasts to them. And also, and this is the critical bit, they allow you to upload a video podcast. And so what they're doing by giving you this free, unlimited storage capacity hosting site that allows video is they're starting to take on YouTube's increasing stranglehold on the video podcast market. So the stats say that there's about 50% of US podcast listeners are actually watchers, and they're watchers on YouTube. Spotify want to take on YouTube because they're essentially kind of eating their lunch, as it were. And so what they're doing is offering podcasters unlimited storage with video integrated. And then what that means for the user point of view, so on the other end, is that you as the listener, if you've got the Spotify app open on your screen, can watch the podcast as well, which is awesome. So I often use that one. A question I often get asked about Spotify for podcasters, or creators.spotify.com. They've gone through a bunch of different names recently. A question I often get asked is, does that mean my podcast only goes on Spotify? No. Reassuringly. So just because they give you your RSS feed and they are your hosting site, it will still go everywhere. So it will still go to Apple, and it will still go to Overcast and all the other places. So rest assured that YouTube, if you want it to go on YouTube, you will still have to post it separately to YouTube though. And it's free. There's no paid tier with creators.spotify.com. So it is a good choice, especially if you're a video podcaster, but even if you're not, it's great.
Should people post on YouTube and on a hosting site?
I think so.
Is that recommended? Obviously, it's extra platforms, it's other ways. And obviously, do most people still go to places like Spotify and Apple and all the places you get podcasts to find their podcasts? Or YouTube's, like you said, they have a stranglehold on the market. Is that where most of them are found now? Or is it still a good mix of both?
I would say whilst they have like an increasing hold on the video podcasting market, they're not the biggest podcast platform. You don't have to upload it yourself these days, which is kind of nice. So YouTube will actually accept RSS feeds now. So you can, if you've already got a YouTube channel, or even if you haven't, you can create one. There's a bit where you can say add a podcast, and you can add the RSS feed that you were given by your hosting site, and it will just put the cover of your show. So if you're happy with it just being a cover, you can just do that. If your podcast is video, then for sure. Can I caveat this a little bit? I feel like I'm caveating all over the place. It might be that maybe it's the it's the medication for this Achilles. I don't know.
We'll blame it on that this time.
We'll blame it on that, but I do feel like I'm all over the place giving random bits of advice. But
it's all gold nuggets.
Well, I don't know. But another thought on YouTube content generally, I've seen this with a few clients. If you've got a relatively successful YouTube channel, or even a YouTube channel that is working towards delivering YouTube content, i.e. you are making other videos outside of podcasts and you're uploading them, and they are kind of tailored to YouTube's algorithms. So, perhaps they're like 8 to 15 minutes long or whatever it is that they're recommending at the moment. And they're great content for YouTube and all the rest of it. And then you go and stick a podcast onto the same channel, or you start uploading podcast episodes, I should say. And those podcast episodes are an hour and 15 minutes long or whatever. They're longer than your normal content. You do run the risk of damaging the success of your YouTube channel generally, because you're mixing up stuff that is doing quite well in terms of, like, if you imagine like one of the big measures on YouTube is like how long was your video watched for? So like viewer duration kind of thing. How long did you retain the engagement of the viewer? And if you've got an 8-minute long video, obviously, and they watch 4 minutes, then that's 50% of that video was watched. If you then go and stick a podcast episode that's an hour and 15 minutes into the same channel, and YouTube doesn't know it's a separate podcast and all that kind of stuff, so you just uploaded it, and people watch 4 minutes, I can't do the maths, but 4 minutes of an hour and 15 minutes.
It's not 50%.
It's not 50%. So YouTube then thinks, oh, okay, well, this account is now failing. So maybe we won't push it to other people to view. We won't suggest it as a channel because people aren't engaging with the content.
Okay. Do you know what I was going to ask? Are there any watch outs from the stuff you've provided so far? Yeah. So I suppose that's watch
one
out
to be
when
careful
it comes
of.
to YouTube.
So a way round that YouTube conundrum, potentially, this is more work though. So, your mileage may vary, as they say. If you took your hour-long video and you carved it up into topics, and essentially turned it into YouTube videos that were 8 to 10 minutes long, then you might not suffer the same issues because your viewing duration is going to be higher. So you can do that. Obviously, you've got YouTube Shorts as well. So if you're promoting your podcast through YouTube, and you're making all those clips, those lovely clips that we've talked about before, then yeah, absolutely. Like you can publish those to YouTube too. So yeah, I definitely would consider YouTube strongly in your kind of plan for your podcast. But like with all things, it depends on what your strategy is, what your content is, how sustainable it is for your lifestyle to then go, trying to create a YouTube channel. I sometimes think, people come into podcasting with the intention of, not everyone, but some people come into it with the intention of being a podcaster. And then they end up with a YouTube channel, a ton of social media accounts. They end up being a TikToker. They get into a whole bunch of different games that they have to play. And I say games they have to play because it is like that, isn't it? This is the world of social media. You have to work out what the game is that TikTok want you to play and what Instagram wants you to play. When they never intended that. So, and I get that's a necessary evil of promotion of anything these days. As business owners, we're all doing it. We're all making content like that. It has to be sustainable for you. And if you end up with wearing all of those different hats, and you've created this like Megillah of a task for yourself, then do you want that? So pick and choose wisely is, I guess, what I'm saying.
Don't create too much work for yourself if it's not sustainable for you. I suppose if all this information is a little bit much and going over some people's heads, then obviously people like us can help as well. So, if you do end up kind of using a space like ours and the people that you use offer an editing service, then usually what that comes with a podcast recording service is publishing and hosting and distribution and stuff like that. So there is also that option. If all you want to do is I know what I want to talk about, I know what format I want, I've got guests ready, or I've got like some sort of milestone plan in place. If you just want to come along and record something and let your kind of operatives and technicians deal with the rest of it, then that's also an option. It's just, but this is all very important and useful information for people that are trying to do it themselves at home and trying to learn. So thank you.
Good stuff.
So next episode 10, will be about growing your audience. I suppose how to promote yourself, get yourself noticed, get your podcast noticed, that sort of thing. Tips and tricks on that. We're going to leave the Instagram Q&A as like a bonus episode once we've done our base ones.
Our base ones.
You know what I mean.
I know what you mean.
Our scheduled ones.
Ones.
Yes.
Yep.
Cool. Okay.
By which point we might have figured out what on earth to do with this
leg
dodgy leg.
We'll give weekly leg updates on one, pain levels, but also how I'm
your
coping.
Annoyance,
and my sympathy.
Maybe both of our tolerance levels.
Yeah. Okay.
Mine to the injury
between 1 and 10.
Your tolerance level to me.
I'll try and be kind.
I look forward to hearing
Do
your
you?
feedback.
I don't think you do.
On that note,
Bye, everyone.
see you next time.